Hey, can you guys hear me at the back? Just shout if I go too quiet. Just wave your hand. Right, no problem. I'll go quite loud. So basically the brief from the guys was looking at project failure. And so I've kind of termed this like service design and science. So you'll see a science theme run through it, hopefully. So I'm a digital strategist at Crater. There's a few fellow strategists I can see in the crowd there, Angus and Kate. I've previously worked as a planner, a project manager, a researcher, a tutor, marketing manager, and account director. So that gives you a feel for the background, what I do know and what I don't know, which I always think is useful. And I studied product design at GSA and then service design at Cologne International School of Design. This is the Crater bunch saying hello, just before I date out. These are some of the clients that we work with on a variety of different things. So some of the service design projects around here would be around healthcare and finance, etc. So quite a wide range of different clients. Just quickly, can you put your hand up if you've worked on a service design project that you would consider a failure? Okay. Now put your hand up if you've experienced a service failure. Right, okay. So what is failure? Just to cover this off, this is the whole theme for the evening, so I just want to cover that one off slightly. In case anyone's interested, that's the Falcon 9 crashing into the water. So lack of success, the neglect or omission of an expected or required action, or the action or state of not functioning. So in essence, it's something not doing what's expected, which we'll come back to. Why does it happen? So, okay, if I'm looking at projects, and I'm like, okay, right, let's look at this. There'll be a lot of data from project managers about why they think projects have failed. So the Project Management Institute say it's probably one of three things. So if you're starting off from a management perspective, it's worth considering comms, the right info to the right people at the right time, process, the approach and methodology you're going to follow, and resources, which is the one that everyone would guess, time, money, people. The other interesting thing for me is when they asked people in a survey what's the most common reason for a project failing, it was a change in the organization's priorities or a change in the project objectives. It's pretty fundamental things. It's not, we have down here maybe an inexperienced project manager or limited resources are quite low down. So I'm going to come back to that as well. Looking at project products and services, I'm going to give some quick examples. So one would be Google Glass. So this was a prototype technology from the future. That's how it was phrased, okay? But Google co-founder Sergey Brin suggested that they launched like a finished product. And it had a huge, massive marketing launch around it. So going back to Sarah's point about expectations, that's where it was then set. So even the Simpsons are taking the piss now. Google goggles, That's when you have a problem, is when the Simpsons are taking the piss out of what you've done. So huge numbers of returns and a commercial failure for now. Okay? So they found, maybe it was a good strategy, maybe it wasn't. They found their little niches around enterprise. But some of the causes for that might be, so this is from having dug around some of the reasons behind it, nobody feeling able to query their boss, which didn't go down well with my boss when I showed him this deck. I got a little glint in the eye. Launching too soon, so not really being ready, and the emphasis more on the idea than the delivery and the implementation. So specifically speaking to the designers in the room, where the idea is held up as the amazing thing, it's much more about maybe the execution and the implementation. It can be hard for agencies and other service designers to be in that position where they're actually helping to implement something. It can be a bit of a handover at that point. And misunderstanding culture and feelings, so particularly in this case around privacy. So if you give something to a group, how do they actually use it? And how does it really feel? Another example, which I'm sure everybody is aware of, is United Airlines. So in this case, security guards were asked to forcibly remove a 69-year-old man to give up his seat for an employee of United. So not great. Brand reputations in tatters. Again, you're now being taken piss out of on Jimmy Kimmel. Stock plummets 1.5 billion. This is quite a simple thing, but again, it's that idea of there was a lack of empathy and probably getting down to that thing about rules and processes and following them too strictly. I don't know if anyone who's been to the States and worked with people in security. It's like, this is the rule. I have no empathy whatsoever. I'm just going to follow the rule. and poor staff and training. So anything that we're doing has actors that we need to account for, and some of the things that we're doing is training or helping people to have that flexibility and to know what to do in that situation. Another example is Facebook Home. Does anybody know about Facebook Home, just out of interest? I'm just intrigued. Nope, didn't think so. So, which says it all. So it was a user interface for Android smartphones. It hid a lot of customization features that Android users liked. Terrible reviews online, and the Facebook phone from HTC was pretty much being given away. And when you dig into the whys and the causes of this, it was essentially down to not testing the value case with real users and not enough understanding or insight. Fundamentally, the developers, ironically enough, they were all iPhone users. So they were working on iPhones and they didn't really understand the distinctions between Android and iOS and the way that people might use Android phones. And as it's Facebook, they were really, really focused on the business benefits as opposed to the customer benefits. So it made a lot of sense as you look at it from a business point of view, but it was definitely not created from a user point of view. So, obviously this is all fine and well. No one particularly likes failure, so how can we avoid it? And I'm going to make 3 sort of light suggestions in the 15 minutes that I have. So, 1, don't try and avoid it. Plan for it. Okay? You're not going to avoid the failures, but the trick is to be able to plan for them and account for them. So the other key thing around this is that failure and success are changing points of view, and this horse is going to help me explain why. Bear with me on this one, okay? So there's a Buddhist story, and if anyone spots it, it was in a film, so if you caught the reference, just shout it out. So basically, a boy gets a horse as a gift. The villagers in the village are like, yay, that guy got a horse, what a lovely gift. And the Zen master says, we'll see. The boy then is on the horse, falls off and breaks his leg. The villagers say, oh, that horse was a curse. It's a terrible thing. And the Zen master will say, we'll see. And then there's a war breaks out, so the boy can't be conscripted. Now the horse is a fortunate gift again. Okay? The Zen master just says, we'll see. The point I'm trying to make is that success and failure can change all the time, and you can't necessarily predict the future. So this is particularly true of things within your personal life. You know, it might be that thing, a job you didn't get, or something else you think you failed at. Because you can't predict the future, you don't know if that's actually a failure or success. What you go on to do next might be much, much better, and you'd be much happier. You never really know, is the point that I'm making. That seems a bit abstract. So what about in reality? Okay? If we're talking about business, organization, innovation, bubble wrap started as wallpaper. Okay? So everybody's heard about Post-it notes. The guy who was trying to invent the glue for Post-it notes was trying to make a really adhesive glue. It's shit. It's terrible for that purpose. He failed by those accounts. But it was really useful in a different way, so it got taken forward. Bubble wrap was no different. It started as wallpaper. I can't imagine. I mean, somebody has decided this is real. They're like, oh yeah, that's how it started. Let's do it again and try and bring it back. And it was a marketer at the company when they were trying to flog it basically as like insulation. Was like, you know what? I think this would be perfect for shipping these new IBM computers. This is back in 1957. And so now it's a success. And another example is WD-40, which means water displacement attempt number 40. There were 39 attempts before it. That was the one that worked. I love the fact that engineers, like this, engineers do branding. Like, what is it? WD-40. Water displacement attempt number 40. And it's never changed. So the point I'm trying to make is that no great success was ever achieved without failures. So it took Edison around about 1,200 attempts to get a working light bulb. And if anyone's ever in Washington, there's in the museum, you can see some of those experiments. It's really, really interesting. Dyson tested 5,271 prototypes across 15 years before he had a working prototype. If you're not prepared to be wrong, you're never going to come up with something original. There's that idea of like relying upon what you already know versus trying something and not really knowing if it's going to succeed or fail. And the only real mistake is the one that you don't learn anything from Henry Ford. So I guess what I'm trying to say is dare to try. Okay? And Google and Tata have specific awards around this. Those teams who attempted to do something and it didn't work, but at least they attempted it and they tried to push the boundaries and try something new. What does that look like in practice? Just some things maybe. So from our perspective at Equator, we'll tend to do what we call a discovery phase, and we'll ballpark the rest of our project. So what we're basically saying is, this is what we know, but that discovery phase can change entirely what we think the best solution is going to be. So we can't necessarily provide a budget for it. Always start by agreeing the primary objective, which is a common one, but as we've shown, the priorities are likely to change halfway through your project, so make sure you've got agreement on it. Allow time within the project process to experiment and to be aware of the fact you're going to get something wrong. There's nothing worse than when you kind of get yourself in a corner and you're like, well, we now don't have the time or the budget. We know it's not right, but we haven't allowed ourselves the space to correct that. And try and reduce that fear of failure. You know that thing in certain organizations where it's that idea of you're not feeling comfortable with failing, you're not feeling comfortable with admitting things. And share the mistakes, not just the successes, because the mistakes are more important for the learning. Number 2, more testing. As anyone who knows me, I love testing things just to see if it actually works or not. So there's some things I want to chat about with that. Fully involve stakeholders, so they're best placed to test your thinking. But the problem is we don't always involve all the right stakeholders in the right way. So the number of things that I've seen run where there is no customer there, and then you wonder why it's not customer focused. The customer is the most important stakeholder. The business guys, they're part of the mix. Really understand the current experience. So really get to grips with it. You go out, you test it, you try it. Okay? And if it's new, is it actually useful? Because one of my favorite things, I used to work as a researcher, is I hate focus groups. In a focus group, you'll say to someone, what do you think about this? Do you like it or not? And people will say, yeah, we like it. What I like to do is say, how much will you pay me for it? Or will you get it right now? And basically make it very clear that we could do whatever that thing is right now, and are they really interested? Then you begin to see the real true nature of whether someone's interested or not. And try and have prospective customers lead it. So the point about Monzo earlier on is a good one. So we work with a few financial services providers, and I remember someone once saying to me that they felt Monzo was needy. And it sort of really got me, because I was like, no, they're not. They're just responding to what customers are saying they want, and then just going and building it. Like it's quite simple, that idea of like, you tell us what you want to see, and then we'll create it for you. And then, great, that's fine. Then you'll switch to us. Aim for objectivity. It's a really, really hard one, but I like testing for the fact that it forces you to start to think, what's the subjectivity in this test? What's my opinion on it? And can I prove that? And focus everyone on the problem, not on the solution. So everybody tends to come to things with the idea of like, here's the solution. You really want to try and refocus them on the problem. And I like using testing for avoiding disagreements. You know, in those meetings where there's different groups and they think, okay, here's what these guys think, here's what these guys think, and here's what these guys think. And it's a little bit on the heated side, and you're like, okay, that's fine. Let's not worry. We can test it. What's the best way to just test it? And odds are we're all wrong. Okay? There might be another thing altogether. And then it's that idea of testing early and often. So again, Rebecca raised this one as well. You can test cheaply and quickly, so don't wait until you've got this. And definitely don't wait till you've got this. Test before this. Start testing the rough journeys of what you're even thinking. You don't even need to get here before you start involving people in testing. Make sure that you're prioritizing the experiments, so it's not just for testing's sake. It's that idea of like, what would most significantly change the project, and testing that first. And that's why it's going to be done cheaply and fast. And one of my pet peeves, it's never really about validation. So you've got to allow for those unexpected outcomes. So quite often people say, yeah, we're going to do some testing, we're going to do some user testing, say. Right, okay, that's fine. But they're not really allowing for what happens if the users don't like any of it. What they think they're aiming for is actually just a tick box or a validation. So for something like visual interfaces rather than voice and other things, we would tend to aim to test the journeys first. And there's a tool which was introduced to us by Martin, who's over there, called TreeJack, which is quite handy for that. Sketch everything out, then create the clickable wires. So again, just since we're speaking to the service designers, we quite like using InVision for that. And then create your fully interactive, responsive prototype. So it's just to give a feel for how we tend to do things like this, because most of the work at Equator focuses around digital, but we do lots of other things as well. and then try and make the experience as real as possible. So get into role play. Leave the uniforms at home, okay, but get into service role play. Any form of theatre, the idea of like backstage and front stage all comes from theatre, so it can be really, really useful when you're trying to try something out. And budget should never really be a problem. You can use cardboard if you need to, or you can use VR if you want to, you know. So don't let budget be a limit on that. And then people always act very differently in a lab setting, so it's okay, it's important to do that. But what's the difference in location? And more interestingly, a common one is, what's the difference in time? So we tend to test this idea of like a journey from here to here, but we never really test it with someone and say, right, now you have to wait a week, now you have to wait 2 weeks. Or trying to give that time element, that can often be missed. In case anybody's wondering, that's our innovation director there. So the reason for this image is testing this in the actual location of a hotel as opposed to in a lab setting. So that's all fine and well. The testing stuff we probably, you know, like, let's be honest, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. What's the most common question that people ask me, who from like a service design background, tends to be like, how am I going to convince other people? And it can be really hard. This guy believes that Earth is flat. To his credit, he's determined to test it, so okay, hats off to him. But despite all the evidence to the contrary, he's not yet convinced. So it can be really, really hard to convince people. So I'm just going to cover off some things that might help with that in terms of convincing other people. Senior stakeholders, most commonly budget holders. So align with the strategy of the organization. So I'm speaking from an agency perspective. Try and speak to the most senior person you can, but make it really easy for them to engage. So if you invite them to a workshop, a half-day or an all-day workshop, odds are they ain't going to come. But you want to know where they think the direction of the organization is going and what their priorities are. Going back to that idea that if you don't do that, odds are they're going to change halfway through your project. And that's really a pain in the ass for all of us. Get a copy of the wider organizational strategy if you can. And quite often, there isn't one. So help them define it. This is what we do a lot of the time. And then carry out objectives mapping across different organizational levels. So I'm going to give an example of what I mean by that. But something occurred to me in the other talks that I just want to test. What do we think that box represents? CEO. Okay, right. And then you got other people, and other people, and other people, and other people. I'd be really interested in, I didn't have time to do it, what happens when that's the customer, and you map the organization around that person? So whoever speaks to them, yeah, they're more important than anybody else. And then you get further back. I didn't get time to do it, so I will at some point, and I'll share it. So objectives mapping, basically this is an exercise that we'll do quite early on in projects, is where we're basically saying, okay, there's different levels. Oh, that's interesting, that wasn't like that before. There's different levels. So you're looking at requirements, strategic objectives, and strategic themes. What that generally meets up with is senior management, middle management, and project team. And the idea of that is to look at, is this project and what we're doing aligning across the organization at different levels? A lot of the time, organizations aren't aligned, but you're aiming to try and get that alignment so it's clear of who's all involved and at what level with the project that you're doing. Showing that competitors are doing it. So one of the things when we're working with senior stakeholders, I don't know, maybe they're competitive by nature. Maybe in the larger organizations there's that element of like, the higher up you go, the more competitive you are. But get benchmarking, you know, figure out who can you use to show that this is what they're doing, this is what they're doing, and this is where you probably need to go. But watch out for that temptation to copy. Because if you know they're already doing that, what are they talking about? What are they thinking about? If you ever want to be ahead of the competition, you need to leapfrog them. So ignore a little bit what they're doing right now and be thinking quite far off. And watch out for those competitors who you might not think are competitors. And one of my favorite things to do is what I call popping the bubbles. So it's that idea where we all have our own bubbles, okay? I work for an agency, so I'm working with a bunch of young people, and the way they use things is very different. If you're working on a different project, you're an entirely different group that you're working with. So be aware of your own bubbles, and it's great fun when you pop other people. So it's that idea of like bringing the customer experience to life with video. Or one of our favorite things to do is like you're trying to close the gap between management and users. So it's that idea of like, if you think about it as closing the gap as far as you can, I think that really helps. We like asking stakeholders to try and do it themselves. If you have to get them out of the office to do that, that's fine. If it's something online, sit and share the pain, okay? Because they need to really understand that pain before they're really going to get behind it. And we're not our users, we're all biased, and we have to keep that in mind. Lastly, very importantly, show it's more profitable. Simple thing. But again, sometimes there's that temptation with projects to be like, this is better, and we know the experience is going to be better, okay? That's fine. But you still need to provide the value case first. You want to benchmark any existing service first. So if it's something completely new, that's one thing. But if it already exists, then make sure you've got all the data you need to benchmark it. Because if you're going to show your impact, you need to do that. Estimate the cost of doing nothing. So it's all fine and well saying, I would like you to spend this to fix this. But you also need to say, right, what's the cost if you don't do it? What does that work out as, and how might you calculate that? And try and find the one metric that matters if you can. So it could be increased market share. It could be, reduced costs. NPS is a good one, a really great one for sort of signs of growth. So it's a favorite of ours. So, in summary, these are the results. In case anyone's wondering, the Wright brothers. Failure is just a point of view. So keep that in mind, both personal and work. It can change. It can be changing all the time, and you're never really able to predict the future. And sometimes something can seem a failure, but you just move it somewhere else and it's not a failure anymore. It's part of success, so dare to try. That idea of like, don't let the fear of failure get in your way. Fully involve customers, like really, really involve customers. Not just a little like, oh, we did this research with these guys over here and here's what we thought. They should be as stakeholders more important than anybody else if you're really interested in doing it well. Test early and cheaply. Align with the wider organization, otherwise somewhere down the line someone's going to change the priorities. Pop the bubbles, and always make it measurable. That's top.